Lately, it's been too hot to enjoy working in the middle part of the day, so I've been getting up early, sometimes around dawn, and going up on the hill when it's still kind of cool. It's a little dark down in the valley, so sometimes I use the headlights just so I can spot a good rock if I need to take it up the hill with me or dodge a turtle. And mornings like this, I'm glad for my little electric tractor because it's not loud enough to wake up my neighbors. And honestly, I look forward to these early mornings because I know I'm going to have fun. Building stone walls is fun. A lot of times when I get to the top of the hill, the sun will just be cresting the ridge behind me, and it lights up the work site with a yellow glow. So in this video, let's go full tilt. Let's rock and roll and learn the advantages of a full bladder. Welcome back to my channel, and thanks for joining me for another update about progress on my little stone studio up on the hill behind our house. And here's what the next step looks like in SketchUp. I've done the foundation, I've done the steps, but now I need to do the west wall, which includes the space for the door. The gray-blue part in the background won't be built this month. That's the next phase. Also, the next phase will include a plate and a beam that will sit on top of the wall. But I'll need to form a couple of shelves to support the beam. And it'll take me more than a month to finish the west wall. I wanted to start the wall at its base with a nice big stone. So I found one and rolled it over to the site on a hand truck. Then I had to figure out how to get it up to the wall. And obviously I've sped this up some. The whole process of setting this stone took about an hour and 20 minutes. But to me it's worth it because having a big stone here and there in the layout helps to organize the arrangement. I've done some graphic design and I've heard this concept called hen and chicks because you have one big element and that helps the eye organize the smaller elements around it. And this is how that big stone looked from the front after I had the formwork built behind it. For the formwork, I built a stud wall and sheathed it with OSB. And then I just taped the joint between the OSB so the concrete wouldn't fill the gap. You can see that the OSB extends several inches below the bottom of the frame, and there's also a 1-inch spacer behind the OSB at the sole plate. And what that'll do is give me the offset I want to create the airspace that I'm looking for between the interior frame and the concrete backing of the stone wall. So this formwork wall is temporary, and I'll move it around to the other side when it's time to build the other stone wall. And yes, it would have been very helpful to have another set of hands here to help with the tilting and the bracing and the plumbing of this form. I do have friends who have offered to help. The problem is I never know exactly what time I'm going to get to a certain stage, and I hate to have them standing around in the heat waiting for me. And it's certainly possible to do a lightweight wall like this by myself. And I used the same process to build a narrower form on the other side of the door opening. After I had stood these walls up, I removed the temporary OSB flooring and screwed additional braces directly to the joists. Then I got back to laying stone. There are different ways to approach this kind of work. What I did was to select the face stones, arrange them dry fit, and then mortar them in place. And then when I'd gone up a foot or so, I backfilled with concrete and rubble, making sure to tamp it down and vibrate it against that form board. And where there are gaps between the stones, I would find smaller stones to fit into the joints. You'll see me reach down to the ground to find small slivers or pebbles. And I'm not going to ask you to watch me lay every stone, so let's just go through some snapshots to show you the progress day by day. So I did wire in some horizontal rebar every 16 or 18 inches in this wall. Would have used more if it were a retaining wall or if it was bearing any kind of load, but the structure that rests on this wall is very lightweight. Only 1/2 of a small roof. What you see me doing here is troweling concrete into the backing against the formwork. And I'll pound on the plywood to vibrate it against the concrete. This took about a ton of concrete, brought up the hill in 60 or 80 pound bags. Every bag of concrete I mixed just like this by hand. And for a long time, the biggest problem was having enough water on hand to mix the concrete and rinse off the tools and the wheelbarrow. Nothing like working on a project like this on top of a dry, rocky hill to make you appreciate plumbing. Finally, I wised up and went looking for a better way to carry water up the hill, and I found it with this. It's just a water bladder. I'm sure a lot of you already knew about this kind of thing, but I didn't. And I found one that fit exactly into the gorilla cart, and all I had to do is tip the gorilla cart and pour the water into the buckets on the site. Even though I still have to carry the buckets to my reservoir, my rain barrel, it does save a lot of time to bring 29 gallons of water up the hill instead of multiple trips with a 3-gallon bucket. By June 27th, the wall was tall enough that I was having to stand on a board to reach the top. So I knew it was time to build some scaffolding. If you watched the earlier episode where I got the lawn tractor off the crate, you may remember that I took the crate and the pallet apart thinking they might be useful. Scaffolding was the ideal use, and actually I was able to build the scaffolding and a couple of sawhorses using only the material from that crate and the pallet underneath it. So I spent a few hours and built the scaffolding and included a handrail where I could lay out the small stones that I use for chinking. So with the scaffolding built, let's take a break. She wanted in that rolling land so fair. Would she say, what kept you, darling, all these years we couldn't share? The scaffolding was a big help, but going up and down looking for stones slowed me down. It also slowed me down to start thinking about how I was going to end this wall and what kind of arrangement of stones was going to terminate the right way and look good all the way to the top. So by early July, I was only able to lay about 1 row of stones a day. Finally, on July 8th, I was adding the last few small stones to the very top of the wall to make it come out nice and level. You can see the string line I was using, those short 2x4s sticking horizontally There's a little red string that runs between those. So I laid to that string. It's giving me the vertical termination point, but also the front edge. You can also probably see to my right here that I have formed a couple of ledges or pockets for the lintel or beam across the door, kind of a header across the door. The ledges will support that header. Here's a close-up of one of those ledges while it was still under construction. You see it's not up to the line yet. And before I take the formwork down, I want to let the concrete cure a little more, but I also need to rake the joints and clean some of the mortar off the face of the stones. Ideally, I would have done this sooner before the mortar set hard as rock, but I was fixated on getting the stones in place and the wall finished, and didn't stop to clean stones every day. So now I've got to do it the hard way. And I'm using a piece of rebar with a twisted end, and it's a pretty good tool for raking these joints. It's strong enough, and it's got a toothy surface that rakes really well. And then I use a wire brush to clean the surface and smooth out the joints after I've raked them with the rebar. Believe me, the next time I'll remember to clean the stones as I go. You'll notice I'm wearing a mask. I'm not worried about getting COVID up here or giving it to anybody. I'm just trying to keep some of the dust out of my lungs. Again, I don't expect anybody to watch all of this. It took me about 6 hours to do the entire wall. Fortunately, I had some good music and a good audio book to listen to while I did this work. And I could keep my cell phone charged in the auxiliary charging port on the Ryobi tractor. So I won't disassemble the scaffolding or strip the forms until I've finished installing the top plates at the top of the wall. And I'm going to let the concrete cure a few days before I do that. So as far as laying rock is concerned, this wall is finished. This is what I had in mind when I drew it up in SketchUp. And this is what it looks like now with the scaffolding still in place and the wall done. And the next wall won't be quite as hard because it'll only be one 6.5-foot section. It won't have a door, and therefore it won't have 4 different corners showing. Every time you build a corner that shows, it's very time consuming. So that's it for this episode. Thank you very much for watching, and I hope you will like, share, and subscribe, and send comments. I'd love to hear from you.